The value of a physical theory depends upon its usefulness. Old theories die hard. Much more is at stake than the theories themselves. If they made their bows of it, we make our gun stocks of it. What helps them to awake is good. What hinders them is evil. Creative writing programs tend to be regarded with justified suspicion. But it would be surprising if it is not that of the mind itself. Even then, change is often painful and slow. This contradicts generally accepted ideas. It has been my perilous privilege over the past decade to undertake teaching forays into the groves of academia. The same is true of scientific theories. That is what I affirmed earlier. Scientific revolutions are forced upon us by the discovery of phenomena that are not comprehensible in terms of the old theories. Concentrate on the point where truth is beginning to dawn. In the truest sense, he was a creative monster. Every man looks at his woodpile with a kind of affection. I love to have mine before my window, and the more chips the better to remind me of my pleasing work. Yet even then it had no permanence. It came and went. As for the axe, I was advised to get the village blacksmith to jump it. Did this make it more possible to measure? For the demand of change in the thought pattern may engender the feeling that the ground is to be pulled from under one's feet. It begins to sound and continues to do so unflaggingly without any interruption. Evidently, we may at that stage measure it by saying how long it lasted. I believe that the difficulties at this point can hardly be overestimated. But I jumped him, and putting a hickory held from the woods into it made it do. If it was dull, it was at least hung true. And as the overwhelming majority of people do not realize and will never realize that they are asleep, neither good nor evil can actually exist for them. Devoted as they are to the scholarly appreciation of art, most academics find the beast intimidating when viewed firsthand. As my driver prophesied when I was plowing, they warmed me twice, once while I was splitting them, and again when they were on the fire, so that no fuel could give out more heat. Unfortunately, if the environment that produced these responses changes, we grow up, and the responses themselves do not adapt, they become counterproductive. That I am measuring time, I know, but I am not measuring the future which does not yet exist, nor the present which has no extension, nor the past which is no longer in being. Those who do not understand that they are asleep, and those who can have no wish to awake, cannot have understanding of good and evil. That is why I have come to think that time is simply a distension. But of what is it a distension? I do not know. In doing so, they also must grant a measure of recognition to the worldviews that accompany them. Skilled in intellectual discourse, distanced by that intellectual skill from their own creative urgings, they often find the creativity of their charges deeply disturbing. People are accustomed to think that good and evil must be the same for everyone, and above all, that good and evil exist for everyone. In reality, however, good and evil exist only for a few. It may happen that a short line, if pronounced slowly, takes longer to read aloud than a longer line taken faster. The realization of the fact that he has no aim and that he is not going anywhere is the first sign of the approaching awakening of a man, or of awakening becoming really possible for him. I'm thinking particularly of a film department chair of my acquaintance, a gifted filmmaker who for many years had been unable or unwilling to expose himself to the rigors and disappointments of creating. Michaud, more than 30 years ago, says that the price of wood for fuel in New York and Philadelphia nearly equals and sometimes exceeds that of the best wood in Paris. By what method, then, can it be measured? But of course, most sleeping people will say that they have an aim and that they are going somewhere. What we measure is the actual interval from the beginning to the end. To accept that nature is fundamentally irrational, governed by chance, which is the essential statement of quantum mechanics, is a powerful blow to the intellect. Not one physicist, not even Planck himself, wanted to accept the implication of Planck's discovery, for to do so threatened the scientific structure, Newtonian physics, over 300 years old. But if it is still sounding, it cannot be measured except from the starting moment when it began to sound to the finish when it ceased. After all our discoveries and inventions, no man will go by a pile of wood. It is as precious to us as it was to our Saxon and Norman ancestors. A permanent idea of good and evil can be formed in man only in connection with a permanent aim and a permanent understanding. And now it cannot be measured because it has ceased to be. But at the time when it was sounding, it was possible because at that time it existed to be measured. It is remarkable what a value is still put upon wood, even in this age and in this new country, a value more permanent and universal than that of gold. Those people aren't studying creativity, they're actually practicing it. Who knows where this could lead? Nor that it is equal to some other length of time, or that in relation to another it is single or double or any such proportion. Once one has experienced the desperation with which clever and conciliatory men of science react to the demand for a change in the thought pattern, one can only be amazed that such revolutions in science have actually been possible at all. To give up our privileged position at the center of the universe, as Copernicus asked, was an enormous psychological task. It is my experience as a visiting artist that many academics are themselves artistic beings who are deeply frustrated by their inability to create. But when it has come to an end, then it will already have ceased to be. Channeling his ferocious creative urges into the lives of his students, he alternately over-controlled and undercut their best endeavors, seeking to vicariously fulfill or justify his own position on the sidelines. In process of passing away, it was extended through a certain space of time by which it could be measured, since the present occupies no length of time. If a man understands that he is asleep, and if he wishes to awake, then everything that helps him to awake will be good, and everything that hinders him, everything that prolongs his sleep, will be evil. What then am I measuring? Time as it passes, but not time past? When new groups of phenomena compel changes in the pattern of thought, even the most eminent of physicists find immense difficulties. For example, a physical voice begins to sound. It sounds. It continues to sound, and then ceases. Mechanics and tradesmen who come in person to the forest on no other errand are sure to attend the wood auction, and even pay a high price for the privilege of gleaning after the wood chopper. Awakening begins when a person realizes that they are going nowhere, and they do not know where to go. I had an old axe which nobody claimed, with which by spells and winter days, on the sunny side of the house, I played about the stumps which I had got out of my bean field. His own thwarted creativity, so luminous in his early films, had darkened to shadow first his own life, and then the lives of his students. In this town, the price of wood rises almost steadily, and the only question is how much higher it is to be this year than it was the last. Showing anger, becoming depressed, flattering, crying, bullying behavior are response patterns appropriate to times often long past. What do I measure, I beg you, my God, when I say without precision, this period is longer than that, or with precision, this is twice as long as that? Nonetheless, as new theories demonstrate superior utility, their adversaries, however reluctantly, have little choice but to accept them. Most of us respond to our environment with a collection of automatic responses that once brought desirable results, usually in childhood. But this is so only for those who want to awake, that is, for those who understand that they are asleep. Though this immense capital annually requires more than 300,000 cords and is surrounded to the distance of 300 miles by cultivated plains. In this sense, the history of physical theories might be said to resemble the history of individual personality traits. Therefore, during that transient process, it could be measured. But take, for example, another voice. It is now many years that men have resorted to the forest for fuel and the materials of the arts. The New Englander and the New Hollander, the Parisian and the Celt, The farmer and Robin Hood, Goody Blake and Harry Gill. In most parts of the world, the prince and the peasant, the scholar and the savage, equally require still a few sticks from the forest to warm them and cook their food. Neither could I do without them. As much as I wanted to dislike this man, and I certainly disliked his behaviors, I found myself unable to regard him without compassion. That is why a sound which has not yet ended cannot be measured. One cannot say how long or short it is. These patterns change only when we are forced to realize that they are no longer productive. Before it sounded, it lay in the future. It could not be measured because it did not exist. Exactly in the same way will he understand what is good and evil for other people. Nevertheless, even so, we have not reached a reliable measure of time. The same principle applies to a poem or a foot or a syllable. Silence has now come, and the voice has passed. There is now no sound. Let us measure it while it is sounding. When it has ceased to sound, it will be past and will not exist to be measurable. Nevertheless, we do measure periods of time, and yet the times we measure are not those which do not yet exist, nor those which already have no existence, nor those which extend over no interval of time, nor those which reach no conclusions. So the times we measure are not future, nor past, nor present, nor those in process of passing away. Yet we measure periods